An accident that changed slavery forever. In the spring of 1857, inside a wealthy Mississippi estate, Lafayette Jones, his second wife Eliza, and their infant daughter Lelia sat down for dinner. A fresh pot of tea was brought to the table. Within hours, the family was seized by a violent, agonizing illness. The eldest son and their dinner guests, who had skipped the tea, watched in horror as the household collapsed. The fingers pointed instantly to the kitchen, to the family's brand new cook, a woman named Josephine. In the antebellum South, an enslaved person accused of poisoning a white family faced an absolute, unyielding death sentence. The courts were built to silence them. Enslaved people were legally forbidden from testifying. Yet, against all historical odds, Josephine's voice survived. Her trial cracked open a window into a hidden world of intimate terror and the lengths a human being.
To understand the poison, we must understand the journey. Just 2 weeks before the Jones family fell ill, Josephine was standing on a wooden platform in New Orleans. She was a commodity up for auction. Lafayette Jones bid on her, bought her, and claimed ownership of her body and her labor. Before New Orleans, Josephine had lived in Kentucky, working as a skilled nurse taking care of small children. She could read, she could write, and she possessed an unusual amount of fine jewelry. For an enslaved woman, such wealth was a dangerous riddle. Mistresses rarely gifted such items. Historians look at Josephine's jewelry and see a darker truth, the tragic tokens of a...
Before we continue with the story of Josephine and the lethal secrets that consumed this entire Southern community, make sure you're subscribed to Echoes of the Past and hit that notification bell. We uncover the darkest corners of American history that textbooks won't touch. So leave a comment telling us what state or city you're listening from, because we love knowing where our audience discovers these forgotten horrors.
There is a persistent myth in American history that working inside the big house, away from the scorching sun of the cotton fields, was a reprieve, a mercy. It was not. Proximity did not lessen the violence, it constantized it. In the field, the overseer is a distant threat. In the house, the tormentor is breathing down your neck. For enslaved women, the household was a trapdoor to inescapable sexual violence.
Court records reveal a horrifying timeline, a running tally of offenses committed against Josephine in a span of just 48 hours. Just 2 days after Lafayette Jones bought her in New Orleans, he sexually assaulted her. On the afternoon before the poisoning, he forced himself on her again. The next morning, the physical torment shifted to the mistress. Eliza Jones complained that the breakfast was cooked poorly. When Josephine answered her with defiance, with a tone the mistress called impudent and saucy, Eliza reported her to Lafayette. The master took a heavy cowhide whip and beat Josephine in the kitchen.
But Josephine refused to be broken. After the beating, Eliza called her back into the room. Instead of bowing her head, Josephine openly defied her mistress, making a face, locking eyes, and intentionally overturning a heavy wooden chair. Furious at this rebellion, Eliza called the plantation overseer to whip Josephine a second time. Think of the rage boiling in that room. Not 2 hours after the second whipping, Eliza called Josephine back into the kitchen and ordered her to cook the family dinner.
But Josephine refused to be broken. After the beating, Eliza called her back into the room. Instead of bowing her head, Josephine openly defied her mistress, making a face, locking eyes, and intentionally overturning a heavy wooden chair. Furious at this rebellion, Eliza called the plantation overseer to whip Josephine a second time. Think of the rage boiling in that room. Not 2 hours after the second whipping, Eliza called Josephine back into the kitchen and ordered her to cook the family dinner.
They expected her to bleed, to cry, and then to serve them. Instead, Josephine walked to the hearth. In the history of American slavery, resistance is heavily gendered.
History books remember the armed insurrections of men like Nat Turner. But women were mired in a different web of interdependency. They were trapped in the nurseries and the kitchens. So while enslaved men resisted out in the open, enslaved women avenged in the dark. They turned to conjuring, to root medicine, and to the silent justice of poison. Josephine reached for the tea.
The infant child, Lelia Virginia, did not survive the night. Josephine and an enslaved man named George were arrested and charged with capital homicide. What followed was an astonishing 4-year battle of trials and mistrials. Because each trial demanded more evidence, the court records accidentally preserved the grim, explicit details of Lafayette Jones's atrocities. In the end, Josephine and George were legally exonerated.
But for an enslaved person, freedom in a white courtroom was an illusion. Exonerated blacks suffered a social death, almost always sold away immediately, torn from their families, and cast deeper into the brutal system. We do not know where Josephine's bones lie today, but her story remains a haunting reminder that beneath the polished veneer of the plantation house, a war was being fought. And sometimes, the most devastating weapon was a simple cup of tea.
Drop a follow to Echoes of the Past for more deep, unfiltered histories that the textbooks left behind. Josephine's story forces us to look at the dark complexity of survival. Was her act a crime, or was it the only form of justice available to her? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk honestly.